Hello, this is Lucy O'Hagan from Wild Awake and welcome to this gorgeous sunny day. So the music that you just heard on the intro to this was made by the plant that I'm going to be speaking about today. So I'd had a lot of requests from friends. Actually, I'd had some complaints that I hadn't sung a song in 2 videos. So today I am not singing a song, so I thought it would be good to listen to the song of the plant. So I hope you enjoyed that. And yeah, I'd love to introduce you to a plant that I have spent most of quarantine with so far. And I think it's a plant that some people would actually love to see be locked up. So it's a plant that stirs lots of really strong emotions for people, and I'd love to just sit with it today and talk to you about it a little bit. So the plant that I'm talking about is, of course, Japanese knotweed. So Japonica I've forgotten the name of the second part. Anyway, Japanese knotweed. So Japanese knotweed is growing right here in front of us. So as you can see, we'll just take a look at how to identify this plant. So it comes up in the early spring and it starts off with these tiny little pink shoots just poking their head out. And as it grows up, it becomes divided into segments. And these segments are joined by something called an ochrea. So it's like a papery membrane around the sheath of the leaf. So it looks a bit like some kind of funky psychedelic asparagus. And as we move up, the leaves start to unfold. And they look a little bit like, they'd be described as kind of shovel-shaped, or as they grow a little bit older, like heart-shaped cordate leaves that have been pulled out. Another way to identify Japanese knotweed would be these spots on the stem, so green with red spots. And then also, when you come across Japanese knotweed or you notice it from a distance, you're probably most likely to notice the stems from last year. So this plant can grow up to 10 feet tall, and the stalks of it dry out and stay in the same place until the next year. So these are the stalks from last year. They're quite small, but if you look behind you, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but far in the distance there are some stalks just against the laurel. So yeah, what a controversial plant it is, and I always find it really, really interesting that we have it stirs such strong emotions for us. So this plant is considered an invasive species, but it's important to remember that it's not actually invasive. We brought it here, you know, it was brought here by humans from, as the name suggests, Japan and China and Korea, where it's considered to be a pioneer species. So what I mean by that is it grows a lot on like volcanic slopes, and it's the first plant to grow on those after the lava flow. So it kind of paves the way for succession, essentially, for new plants to grow. So it breaks up the ground and makes the soil fertile again, which is why when it was brought over here and it doesn't have any natural predators in this environment, and it has spread like quite a lot through the northern hemisphere, it tends to take over because that is its behavior, you know, that's what it's adapted to do in the places where it is native to. So like when we think about the behavior and the adaptation strategies of Japanese knotweed, it can grow up through volcanic rock, you know, so it's not surprising that it can come up through concrete in cities, but it thrives on disturbed ground. So let's just think about that for a second. So it thrives on disturbed ground, so the places where it's growing here are places that have been disturbed by humans already. So when we're reconsidering how we approach these plants which are not native and which are not adapted to our place, it's worth thinking about, you know, like, well, what are the conditions that are allowing for this plant to thrive? Like, what human behaviours have disturbed the ground, and so letting this plant come in and take over. So that could be anything from, you know, like buildings or waste grounds, or where there have been dams built, or like some unsustainable farming practices, or you know, like waterways where there's been a lot of erosion. So Japanese knotweed will tend to grow very close to streams and rivers. Right here we've got it next to the pond. So yeah, it's just worth thinking about reframing how we approach these plants, because at the moment we're treating them like as if they're out to get us, which the plants are not. They're just trying to grow. Yeah, like what can we do? Like, how can we approach this plant? We already have such a huge respect for it, which is sort of demonstrated through fear, but how can we approach it in a different way? So at the moment you might see it at the side of the road. You'll notice that there's signs saying like, don't pick it, don't move it, because it's so like robust and it's growing, that even a tiny little piece of root can root in another place and it will spread very easily. So it is an offence to transport this plant, or to intentionally propagate it or grow it, or like encourage the growth of it. So like the way that this has been dealt with is like people have injected it with glyphosates, or sprayed it. And if we think about like what that actually does, you know, like we're injecting the environment with chemicals. Those are leached out into the soil, which are absorbed by all the different microorganisms. Because it grows by waters, that's carried in the waters, it's absorbed through the skins of fish and amphibians. And the plant actually, you know, we're disturbing the ground more by spraying it or digging it. So the plant loves that. It's like, great, you're just disturbing the ground even more for me. I'm just going to grow even more vigorously. So maybe we need to rethink this. So where I live, you know, there is quite a lot of it, and it's private land, and I've spoken to the landowners. So this, like, they're not going to spray this patch, and they're going to let me harvest it instead. So we're going to just see what happens throughout these years as I continue to harvest it. So why might I be harvesting it? So this is a really great question, and I was totally blown away when I found out that Japanese knotweed is actually edible and highly medicinal as well, so we'll come on to that. So when to harvest it? So if you're harvesting it for food purposes, please make sure that you know that the area hasn't been sprayed or injected. And the only way that you can really be sure is to ask your local council or the local landowner. You can't really just tell by looking at it. So yeah, don't be consuming anything that's going to be harmful to your health, which these chemicals are. So we want to be harvesting the young shoots in the spring. So I've been harvesting this for the past month. And I will continue to harvest it probably up until about May time, the shoots anyway. So we don't want the shoots, like, this is kind of the tenderest growth. So what I'll do is I'll just, you're going to hear that lovely noise hopefully, maybe not. You just pull it up, and at the base of the plant it's solid, and as we move up it becomes hollow. There's that gorgeous popping sound that we heard in the music in the beginning. And it's getting a little bit bigger here, so I'll just harvest the top of this because it's going to be more tender. So the new growth is most tender. Okay, so these are my shoots. So as we said, it's important like not to carry this plant and propagate it elsewhere, so I always clean the plant in the place where I picked it from. So I'll just spend some time picking off the leaves, picking off the tips so that they're like this. Japonica. So these would be ready to bring home. And if you did bring these home and were preparing it at home, you would need to be very careful about disposing of this very responsibly, because although we don't want to demonize this plant, we also don't want to spread it. You know, it will take over and it will shade out our native plants and change this ecosystem. So we're still being responsible with it. Like, I'm by no means saying that we should be growing this plant, just that we should be maybe changing our attitude towards it a little bit and managing it in a different way by eating it. So if you did bring it home, don't put anything on your compost, don't put anything like in your garden, any scraps. It's important to boil them up into a pulp and to bring them back to where you've harvested from, or it's also recommended to burn them as well. I don't know if that's a little bit of overkill, because I think if you boil something to a pulp, I don't know how it's going to regrow, but let's follow the protocol. So yeah, I'll harvest these, are my shoots, which I'm going to use for food. So how to use it for food? So you can eat it raw. And what does it taste like? Yeah, so there are some like chefs who are starting to call this wild rhubarb now instead of Japanese knotweed, because the name itself is so loaded. So wild rhubarb, it tastes like rhubarb. It is in the same family as the dock family, Polygonaceae. So I'll chop this up and I'll maybe eat it raw in a salad, or I'll blitz it up into a smoothie, or I'll just treat it like rhubarb. So I'll put it in the pot with a little bit of water and boil it until it's soft, and then I'll blitz it. So I'll put it in my NutriBullet, and then you have like a Japanese knotweed puree. So I've been doing that flat out for the past month because there's so much of it. And I've just been freezing it in freezer bags so that I can take it out when I need it. So what might you use a puree for? So I made some cake yesterday, which is really good. So kind of making cake as if you're using like applesauce. And I burnt it, but it still tasted good. And I've also been using the puree to make fruit leathers. So fruit leathers being this amazing thing. Essentially you make a puree, and you could do this like we think about it in the autumn with like blackberries or haws or other fruits, and you want to mix it with like a something that's high in pectin, which will help it to set. So this is Japanese knotweed puree mixed with apple puree, and I spread it out on a baking tray and put it in my dehydrator, and then when you pull it off, like I dehydrate it. So you could do it in the sun if we got a really sunny day, or in a very low setting in your oven as well, and that will just dehydrate it into these sheets. So it looks a little bit like cardboard but it tastes really, really good. So it has like quite a sour taste, and it's a really nice thing to make fruit leathers with kids, because there's no sugar in this, but drying like increases the intensity of the sugary taste. It's very good, Matthew, isn't it? You tried some. So that's the fruit leather. I've also been making some jams with it. So again, just making that puree. I put in some raisins and sugar, and I've been making chutney as well. So the chutney is really delicious, and instead of adding water, I add cider vinegar and raisins again and boil it up. So it's really, really good with cheese, and we've been eating it with loads of stuff. I've also pickled some, which has been really good, and I've lacto fermented some as well. So the lacto fermenting just increases that sour taste. So they're like little sour lozenges, and I'm a total stickler for, no, I'm a stickler for sour? No, I'm a fan of sour. Yeah, I love sours. So It's really good. And I've also made a cordial with it. And this has been really delicious, just like mixed in with fizzy water and into cocktails and things as well. And it has such a beautiful colour. So there are loads of things that you can do with Japanese knotweed. Other people I know are making like tarts, cakes, yeah, endless possibilities. And then if you make a drink with them, then these can also become like little drinking straws as well. So you just need to hollow them the whole way through and drink through it. So beyond food, there's also a chemical in Japanese knotweed called resveratrol. Not very good with pronunciations. Resveratrol. So resveratrol is also found in the skins of grapes, which is why people will say like that drinking, you know, maybe so like a glass of red wine is really good for your heart, because resveratrol is really good as like a cardio drug, and also as yeah, like a really amazing like antiviral. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm not a doctor or a herbalist, but it's really amazing to think about like the possibilities of this plant and the medicine that it might offer. I know a lot of herbalists are using the roots in the treatment of Lyme disease, and this is proven like really effective. But the trouble is, because it's illegal to uproot this plant or to transport it, that they're actually having to buy in the roots from elsewhere. So it just all feels a little bit, doesn't make sense really. So yeah, we've had food and medicine, but there are other craft uses of Japanese knotweed as well. So inspired by Nick Netto, his book The Organic Artist, and he has one, The Organic Artist for Kids as well. Such an amazing book about how you can create art and pigments from the land, so from rocks, from charcoal, yeah, from berries, from oak galls, loads of stuff in there, like, and how to make natural paintbrushes, and then also how to make crayons. So I ground up some rocks yesterday and I mixed them with, I mixed the rock pigment with beeswax, and then I poured them into the molds of the old stalks of Japanese knotweed. So imagine these, I just pulled off some old stalks like that, and then made up the pigment and beeswax mixture and poured it into the molds. And as you can see, it works. And you can sharpen these down as well when you want new crayon. So this is the colour of the rocks from the river near my house. So yeah, the old stalks as a mould. And I imagine you could also use this as a mould for chocolate as well. You know, the stalks grow very, very thick, and you could like put some berries in there, or put like some candied Japanese knotweed in and pour chocolate over and create like a chocolate bar. And another thing that I've been experimenting with is making Japanese knotweed cordage. So I showed you this in the lime video. So this is cord that was taken off the new stalks of the lime. So let's see. This one. Love that sound. So we'll see if this one works. So pushing up a new stalk. And we want to take away the middle part to just be left with the outer bark, essentially, of the plant. This one doesn't work as well, but you can experiment with different ones. Yeah, I got much longer fibres out of it, but it has a very long stalk and it is very fibrous, so great for making a very strong cordage, which is really beautiful. I've dried this already, but it's still like pink and green and things. So I'm going to experiment with that. Maybe I'll make a Japanese knotweed bag to harvest my Japanese knotweed in. And yeah, also like something that I've heard of doing, which I'm really excited about experimenting with this year, is that the leaves are really high in tannin. So I'm going to take all the leaves from any, like I'm going to harvest all of these shoots as much as possible for food this year, but there's loads more growing. So I'm going to take all of the leaves and use them to make a tanning solution to tan my deer hides in as well. So I will check back in with you about that. And yeah, like we're gonna see, like I'm gonna manage this patch this year and see what happens when I'm picking it for food, using the leaves for tanning, and just seeing what happens when we don't spray this area and we have a forager come in and try and manage it in a different way. So I'll let you know how that goes. Yeah, and I'll put any links or any like suggested further reading into the description section. So yeah, a different way to appreciate a plant that I'm sure a lot of us have heard of, and to rethink it in a new way. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.